Hello and welcome to the 28th episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. This week's episode is with Shanna Jade. She is the head of music for North America at Dice, which is a ticketing and discovery platform revolutionizing how fans find and attend shows in major cities all around the world. She's a music lover and is based in Los Angeles and has more than 10 years of experience in music and marketing. Previously, before joining Dice, she worked at Complex and managed the Grammy Award winner Anna Wise. While she was at Complex, she built social media campaigns for brands like Nike, Adidas, Levi's, and Reebok, among other things. After she decided she wanted to pursue music full-time after Complex, she joined the distribution and payments platform Stem as its second employee. She oversaw many departments, including artist relations, support, brand, and marketing. She established a voice for Stem, built multiple teams internally, and championed key partnerships to prove the product's value across the music industry. So, in this episode, Shanna and I talk about what it takes to kind of build a social media campaign for an artist, what an artist should do on social media when you're building your voice and kind of discovering that. And she also talks about viewing yourself as a CEO rather than just an artist, because being an artist is a business. So putting yourself in those shoes as a CEO and overseeing all legs of what it takes to run you being an artist, then that's going to better position you to kind of better understand the music industry and your career, both financially and professionally. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over the conversation to the incredibly talented and widely well-versed Miss Shanna Jade.
I have worked in music ever since I was a teenager, on and off. And right now I'm the head of music for North America for Dice, which is a ticketing and discovery platform that's completely changing how fans find and access shows in their cities all over the world. But really, I got my start when I was a teenager and I was going to my friends' shows and was selling merch for them and started to realize that they weren't really managing their money quite well. So I offered to manage them, which, as a teenager, what does that really mean? So I would help them settle out at the end of shows, make sure that the merch splits with the promoters would go well, and book them for battles of the bands that my dad would drive me to and drop me off at. And when I was 18 and a senior in high school, I ended up taking a job with a local concert promoter in upstate New York, where I grew up, and just learned various things there and found that I wanted to pursue this path for myself. So I ended up going to Northeastern University in Boston and studied music industry there. And they have a really great program. I'm not sure if you're aware, with their co-op program, you're able to take time off that's within the curriculum and intern at different places and work for yourself. And I took advantage of that because when I was in school, I decided that I wanted to manage and that was going to be the career path for me, and ended up linking up with a friend of mine who was managing some artists that I liked and started helping him out. And we grew this company that he had started together called G House. And we went from managing a couple artists here and there to offering really anything that the artist could possibly need and bringing on a roster of 10 plus artists. So we were releasing records for them and helping them put together album artwork and coming up with the strategy and handling the distribution and booking tours, tour managing those tours, doing our own South by Southwest showcases and different things like that. And it was cool because we ended up getting the attention of the Orchard and ended up getting a distribution deal with them, which was really exciting. So that was a cool experience, and I got to really make that what I wanted to be, just because we were working for ourselves and not for a big company. So it was kind of just learning as we go and building the plane as we fly. And I think as I progress in my career, I found that I definitely prefer situations like that, where I get to kind of help write the handbook instead of have the handbook given to me. So after that, when I graduated, I took a few jobs that were adjacent to music and was still managing here and there, but really was focused on like fashion and streetwear when I worked at Karma Loop, and then focused more on marketing and social media strategy when I moved to New York and started working for Complex as a social strategist on their product and business development team. So there I really learned a lot about different marketing strategies and how artists can really leverage social media. So if Nike or Adidas or Reebok or Moet or Levi's, any of these massive brands would want to run a marketing campaign with Complex and it would involve any sort of social media, I would be the person that would come up with the strategy, come up with our KPIs and what we want that to look like, pitch it to the client, and then execute that entire campaign and report on it. So I did that for a couple years, and then honestly had a quarter life crisis and was like, what am I doing? I love music. This is what I want to work in. And I was managing an artist on the side, but I didn't feel like I was fully in music or really just doing anything that I had planned to. So I quit my job at Complex with no real plan and was freelance writing, and had pitched my same friend who had started G House on his new company, Stem, to do their content strategy for them. So I sent them a deck, we went back and forth, and they ended up bringing me on as a contractor to help them create the brand, the voice, write all of their blog content, launch their socials, all of that. And I kind of took that as, great, I can move out to LA now. So I sold all my stuff, drove out to LA, and was living out here. And this was like almost 4 years ago at this point. And Stem, which is a distribution and payments platform for artists and their teams, was the 3 co-founders and 1 engineer at a time, and really was maybe like 6 months old. And just after spending time at the office, the founders asked me, like, do you want to do this full time with us? Like, we really don't have a job description for you, but we need help building this. We need someone that can interface with artists, and we know that you can do this, because I had worked with one of the founders before. So I came onto the company as the second hire and the first non-engineer. And throughout my time there, I grew into this role where I helped prove concept for Stem with key partners that really brought us into the music industry and showed that we were a key player in terms of allowing artists to take control of their own careers and really understand their revenue streams. So with Stem, artists could upload their music, input their splits, distribute the music, and then those splits would be automatically honored every month when they were paid. So it alleviated the accounting burden for their teams. So I really helped formulate how we tell that story to the music industry, and helped onboard everyone from like Brent Faiyaz and his team to releasing an old Childish Gambino mixtape to working with Selection to relaunch their record label, like tons of different use cases. And it focused on that for the first couple of years while I was at Stem, overseeing artist relations and artist support. And then in my last year there, moved into a brand and marketing role to basically help expand the reach of the platform. So launching all of our out-of-home campaigns, event activations, press, and things like that, which was really exciting. And then I left Stem this past year and moved over to Dice, where I am currently as head of music for North America. So like I said earlier, Dice is a ticketing and discovery platform, and our main customer is the fan. And my job as head of music for North America is to make sure that in every city we're launched in, we have the best, most culturally relevant shows on the platform for those fans to discover, so that they can go out and have their next life-changing night that they discovered on Dice.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you have a very extensive career and have really kind of dived in. It's really interesting to hear how technology is really starting to blend with music and how important it is to stay relevant on all of the technology because I've heard of STEM, but I haven't done as much research on it as I should have, I guess, or should. But I have a few friends and publicist friends that have artists that have released through STEM. So I am aware of the platform. And it's such an interesting thing and how you can basically take such a complicated process like accounting and completely get rid of it and simplify it for somebody who knows nothing about accounting. So that's to me is super impressive.
I think that technology is becoming a pillar of creation for artists, and it's a key part of really every component of an artist's career. Like, even thinking about how we connect with each other, meeting friends through social media, or following somebody and they follow you back, and then you start DMing and realizing that maybe you can collaborate together. Like technology starts from the inception of the creation process, and it extends all the way through the end game, like the marketing and accounting parts of it. Like, I think that like technology is just very important for artists. So whether they're figuring out what's the best way to get their music out and using technology to automate royalty splits or get their music to DSPs faster, to actually allowing fans to discover their music on those DSPs. It's a huge part of the process. I think that the music industry has been slow in some areas to adopt different parts of technology. And to me, my career mission is to help artists and their teams with technology. And what's cool about working at somewhere like DICE now is I'm able to bring a better experience to venues, promoters, to artists, to managers, to agents, to labels, but really bring a better experience to the fans, because really at the end of the day, like, the fans are what drive the music business. Like, we wouldn't be in this business if it weren't for fans engaging with music, buying albums, listening to albums, showing up to shows, and generally supporting the artists that they love. So the fact that I'm able to work on technology that just helps to streamline and improve how people engage with music and how that music gets to those people is amazing to me.
You had mentioned that technology is a little bit slow to adapt in some areas of the music industry. What areas are you seeing this slow adaptation or adoption? And how can we speed this process up? Is there anything we can do?
I think it's across the board, but in the context of ticketing, for example, and working with DICE, I think that now is actually the perfect time for us to launch in the US. Like, there's never been a better time for DICE to be here, because fans are really fed up with all of the slow, outdated options that are available to them when it comes to ticketing. So I really think what drives the adoption of new technology in the music business is, first, people being forward thinking and being more open-minded about how they can run their businesses. And then two, just listening to the consumers. And, depending on the area of the business, whether that's listening to artists and their teams when it comes to distribution, or listening to fans and venues and promoters when it comes to ticketing, there needs to be solutions for the problems. And I think that, companies like DICE that are leaning on technology in order to provide solutions for these broken systems, they're so important to have around.
Like, we've established that technology is super, super important in today's day and age. And especially in the music industry, it's so important to stay up to beat with all of this technology. So you had mentioned like STEM is splitting royalties for these these artists that are using their platform. And then you had mentioned earlier when you had kind of introduced yourself that you were managing some of your friends in a band and whatnot, kind of helping them get their accounting and stuff to make sure that the promoter is paid properly, they're paid properly. How does that process work? Can you kind of walk us through the process of an artist performing or a band performing, and then at the end of the night, all the money's collected, and then splitting that out? Can you kind of walk us through that?
The way that it typically works is that a promoter will work with a venue, or often a venue will have a talent buyer in-house, and they kind of act as their own promoter. They'll get a hold on the venue, and then they'll work with different talent depending on, what they want the vibe of the night to be, who they're speaking with. They'll work with either the talent directly, or they'll work with their agents to figure out what an acceptable offer is. So the promoter will then send, let's say the agent in this scenario, they'll send them an offer with a guarantee for the artist. So that's a guaranteed amount of money that the artist will be paid for their time and effort and showing up. And then commonly in promoter deals, artists will also see more money if the show sells out, or if they hit break even, the artist will walk away with a percentage of the door beyond break even, or there'll be some sort of bar buyout or bar split that will go to the promoter as well. It really depends. Like, there isn't one cut and dry way to make an offer on a show or promote a show. There's a lot of different methods to make it happen. But what's important for artists, especially up-and-coming artists that maybe don't have a full team, like maybe they don't have a manager or a day-to-day that's advancing shows for them, maybe they don't have an agent that's going to bat for them and making sure that they get the best offer possible, just having someone there and showing up and kind of taking that off the artist's plate is really important. So when I was younger doing this for my friends, that was, answering the email and making sure that the artists got their cash before they left, or made sure that fans were actually paying for their merchandise and like engaging with them at the merchandise booth. When it comes to artists and money, I think that we're experiencing a change right now, but generally in the music industry, I think it's just been accepted that money is kind of a don't ask, don't tell sort of thing. Like, everyone behind the scenes knows what's going on in terms of where the money is going, but artists are left in the dark and kind of left to doing their job, which is creating the music and performing the music live. And I believe that we're in a time right now where artists have the ability to control their careers more than they ever have before. And that's a big responsibility, and it's a lot to put on artists. So I think that, kind of going back to earlier in our conversation about how technology plays a role in like just artistry and music in general, it's so important for artists to have tools and for their teams to have tools in order to build the businesses that they want, because there isn't a cut and dry way for artists to make it at this point. Like, it used to be, you kind of hit these milestones, like you get a manager and then you sign to a label and then you release an album and then you go on a tour and then that repeats. And we're seeing artists of all different caliber break that mold now, and it's really exciting. So I think that kind of going hand in hand with that and thinking, okay, artists can make it any way that they want and success isn't linear. I think that at the key of that, or at the core of that, is that artists being able to understand their money and make more educated decisions about their businesses and how they use that money based on data. And that data is going to come from great technology supplementing their businesses.
I've always talked on the podcast, even in previous episodes, about how important it is for an artist or a band to kind of understand the music industry on a basic level. So whether that be finance 101, accounting 101, touring 101, merch 101, copyrights 101, royalties 101, et cetera, et cetera. Having a basic understanding of these topics and industries, for that matter, is very important in your success as an artist or a band. So for example, if you don't know anything about touring and you're hiring a tour manager or a tour team and they find that out, they may be able to kind of find loopholes and take advantage of you because you don't know anything about that. Whereas if you were to come in and they were to come in and they try to say something that's completely out of line, you can be like, that doesn't seem right. And you can kind of question things. So like you had said, today is better now than ever to kind of get in and be involved in these things and really be involved in your career and kind of take hold of all these different things because you have the resources, you have a team that you can contact and use your resources for. So I've always stressed that and how important it is to kind of learn the basics of everything. And you're kind of showcasing that and saying, hey, this is important because you're going to have to do this. If you want a successful career, you're going to need to know this, and that, and you're going to need to hire this type of person, that type of person to do these types of deals for you.
Absolutely. And, knowledge is power. Like it's very cliche to say, but I think that the more artists can educate themselves on the areas of their business outside of what's quote unquote their job, i.e. creating music and creating the art itself, the stronger they're going to be. Like I like to think of artists as CEOs, and the artistry itself is their business, and they're running this business every single day. If that's how seriously they want to take it, right? Like success looks different to each and every person. And there are some artists who are happy being musicians on the side. There are artists that want to dedicate their entire lives to doing it. And I think that depending on what your expectations are for you and your business, however that looks, you should plan accordingly. And it never hurts to educate yourself on the various aspects of what's going to impact your business. It doesn't mean that you have to do it yourself. Like being an independent artist does not mean that, you're loading in the gear and doing your own sound check and advancing your own shows and everything. It just means that you're doing it a little bit differently than how people expect you to. And finding the right people to be on your team and be part of your business can be hard and it can be time consuming. But knowing how to do it yourself before you outsource that job is invaluable. And it's just going to make you a stronger artist and CEO.
Absolutely. And like I said, I like how you reference artists and you position them and kind of view them as CEOs, because no CEO of any company, any brand, regardless of how big or small, doesn't not know about their company. They know the ins and outs of their company. They know the ins and outs of their industry. And being a musician, you're going to understand the ins and outs of music. You're obviously a musician. You're pursuing a career in this. You should know something about music. So as you're taking on your brand and your company, your business, you are a business as a musician. You know all this stuff. You're understanding all of these different things. So I can't stress how important it is, and I'm sure you can attest to that as well. And learning all these things and understanding these things, and just that's going to make you stronger and better positioned as a musician. So earlier you had talked about kind of flexibility as well, and that's super, super, super important in this industry. So in your experience, when you're working for, say, a smaller company versus a bigger company, how important is that flexibility? And how have you kind of seen yourself thrive because of that flexibility? What has that flexibility allowed you to do to kind of grow personally and professionally, either within the music industry or even within a company?
So I think that this answer is different for everyone. For myself personally, I tend to thrive in ambiguity. I love being presented with a problem to solve and coming up with ways to solve it, and understanding that not everything is going to work, but at the end of the day, I'm going to be part of making that solution happen. There are people out there that are the opposite and don't want the flexibility or the ambiguity to make changes in their workplace. And that's okay too. It really just depends on your own personality and what your goals are. But for me, I think that flexibility in the workplace is really important. And I've only worked for one really large company in my life, and that was Complex. Every other company that I've been at has been under 100 people. And I think that there's something really special about that experience because we're still figuring it out. Like, it's startup life. Like, there are things that work really well and we have the playbook and we know how to do them. And then there are other things where we're still iterating. But being part of that iterating is really powerful in terms of showing me what works and what doesn't work and how I can be a better professional along the way. And I think also, too, I've been really fortunate to not only work for companies that have the flexibility internally for its employees, but also that value flexibility for its consumers as well, whether that's Stem giving artists the flexibility to collaborate with whoever they want because they don't have to worry about accounting, or Dice giving fans the flexibility to discover a new show that they wouldn't have found otherwise, or to purchase tickets to a show and then, you know, when it gets a bit closer, realize, oh, I can't make it. It's easy for me to sell my ticket back to the waiting list on the platform and allowing fans to get refunds. Like, I think that I value companies that have flexibility on both sides and value that in what they're building and what they're creating.
I certainly agree to that as well. I've worked for I've worked for pretty big companies. I currently do. And I also worked for smaller companies. I worked for freelancing people, you know, so there are some freelance projects where they don't want any ambiguity. Everything's kind of planned out. Everything's outlined. They just hand you what they want. You do it. It's kind of like autopilot robot mode. And then there's some other like large corporations. And then there's even small freelance people that I've worked with that are like, yeah, here's a general idea. And here is what I'm thinking, and I want you to roll with it. Come up with something fun, and then in a week, come back to me with something. And I thrive on that as well because the creativity is fun, and you can also learn quite a bit from other people you're working with on that project. So in your little biography that you had filled out, I want to transition just a little bit into kind of marketing and really something that you thrive in. And so you put in your description that you worked on like social media campaigns and for like big brands like Nike, Adidas, Levi's, Reebok, all those major corporations and companies. What is kind of a social media strategy that an artist can take? Can you give, I know that it's very specific and tailored to every artist, but can you give us like a basic kind of outline so people can kind of understand what a social media campaign should or would look like?
Yeah. So I think like tactical advice aside, the most important thing that an artist can employ in terms of their marketing and social media is to just throw away the playbook and let their personality shine through and be active too. Like, social media is such a wonderful thing because it allows artists to connect directly to their fans with no middleman. Like, as an artist, you don't need to build up a massive following in order to talk to anyone because you need to wait to get a deal with a brand in order to have a platform. Like, we're seeing more and more that artists are creating their own platforms and creating their own engaged audiences that make it so that they don't need these massive deals or they don't need these cosigns that they needed maybe 10, 15 years ago in order to have a platform. So I think that, you know, thinking in terms of a social media strategy, it's really just be active, be genuine, and listen to your audience and listen to your fans. They're going to tell you what they like and they don't like, and they aren't going to be shy about it. And it's going to be up to you to, as the artist, to take that into consideration and to be a human to them. Like, at the end of the day, artists are humans too. Like we look at celebrities as a different type of person, but really they're buying groceries at the end of the day. They're hanging out with their friends. They have good days and they have bad days, and they have like stresses and anxieties that we all have in our everyday lives. And I think my favorite artists to engage with on social media have been the ones that aren't afraid to let their fans into those experiences and to be their authentic selves. So it's not as much of a strategy as it is just like an approach that you can tailor into different strategies. But I think it's really important. And we even see that too, like at Dice, there are countless artists that I see who are speaking out against scalpers on social media, or they'll put tickets up for sale for a tour, and that tour will sell out. And then the fans will be stuck with going to various secondary sites in order to get overpriced tickets from bots and from touts. And they'll tell the artists on social media, and then the artists will be able to see exactly what's happening in real time with their fans and be able to adjust accordingly. And that's really powerful. Like, going back to this idea that artists are CEOs running their own businesses, they have the most powerful set of beta testers right at their fingertips, if you want to think about it that way in terms of product. Like, artists can do something and get instantaneous feedback from their audience by way of social media. And that's so powerful. Like, there hasn't been a better way for artists to connect with their fans directly than there is right now.
I agree. And I think that goes with a lot of industries as well, or any company. You go to any company, you're expecting, or any service, you're expecting top-notch service. You're expecting everything to go. You're going in, you're doing what you need to do, you're getting what you need to get, and you're going out happy, satisfied, and pleased with how everything went. And just like a concert, you go to a concert, you pay the price, you have a good time, and you leave. And it's a pretty straightforward thing for the average consumer. And if one of those things on a basic level goes wrong, there can be hellfire to put out. And that can really ring quickly, especially at like a major event or a festival or something like that. If something goes wrong at one of those events, people are going to start talking about it and retweeting it and reposting it and sharing it, and it can spread very quickly. So like you had mentioned how artists can very quickly interact with their fans, that's so important. They can address scalping. They can address those people who are out scamming those people, and that is so important. If you can put out a fire before it becomes a forest fire, I think that's super, super, super important. You had mentioned also that your favorite artists to interact with are those who are relatable, and I would also agree on that. Do you think, and I know this depends on artists and their personalities, but do you think that artists or bands or whoever should at least be some kind of relatable in some respect?
I don't want to say what artists should and shouldn't do, just because, like, one of my favorite artists to listen to is Bjork, and I definitely don't relate to her on a day-to-day level, but she creates amazing music. And then there are other artists that are on social media and talking to their fans, like a Billie Eilish, for example, where it's like, okay, I see myself in her a lot. I think it just depends on what kind of image you're trying to create. Like, I think somebody like Frank Ocean is actually pretty fascinating when it comes to that, because he's done a very good job of remaining reclusive and remaining private, but the pieces of himself that he does allow us to see, it's easy to see that he's cool as fuck and that I want to be friends with him, Like, but he's not giving everything away on social media every single day, telling us what he's having for breakfast or what he's wearing that day. It's more bits and pieces. So it's not that artists should be relatable. It's just it's important for them to decide how much they want to let their fans into their day-to-day and stick to that and act accordingly and listen to their fans. Like I've been saying, there isn't a one-size-fits-all way for artists to do one thing or do another thing, especially nowadays when really there's unlimited ways where artists can build an audience and get attention and get their music out there. But it's really just more about like creating your own personal brand and then making decisions and actions that go in line with that personal brand that you're creating.
And I had a previous guest on the show. They talked about, I'm drawing a blank at the moment who it was, and they had talked about the importance of it was Miss Jasmine Valencia. She owns a public relations company, and she was talking about how artists had partnered up, or she had a partnership with I believe it was a suitcase company, because the artist had travels a lot for their shows or for whatever it be. So they were partnering with this suitcase company, and they would post X amount of posts per month or per week, and they would both kind of grow each other from that. So would you think that's an actionable step to take for an artist's career today, and like social media? Or what are some other avenues on social media that an artist can take to kind of grow their careers?
I think that taking advantage of new features on social media is key, because we see like early adopters of platforms that are now massive kind of got in on the ground floor. And that's like anything, right? Like anything that's successful, you always wish that you started using it earlier. So I think that for artists, like IGTV is a great example. And an artist like John Mayer probably doesn't need to grow his fan base that much. Like, it's not that he's hit a ceiling, but he's very well known. Like, he's a household name. But he saw an opportunity with IGTV to just go live every Sunday and have this hybrid talk show music session that has grown into something that fans really identify with and really look forward to every single week. And it's now a huge franchise for him. But had he not given that new feature on Instagram a chance, he wouldn't have unlocked this opportunity for himself to connect with his fans in a different way, and to also give opportunities to up-and-coming artists to bring onto his show. It's called Current Mood with John Mayer, and he's had everyone from Cautious Clay to Halsey to Khalid on it to Daniel Caesar. Like, it's really cool to see when artists adopt new technology and build their audiences, and then when more established artists kind of open the door to younger artists to help them build their audiences as well. So I think that strategically for artists on social media, like, if you see that a platform that you love and a platform that you already have an audience on is rolling out a new feature, give it a shot and see how it goes. It might take a little bit of iteration to, get it right, but there could be a lot of potential for you there that maybe you hadn't thought of prior.
Exactly. And that comes back to our earlier discussion on how taking advantage of music technology and the technology that is available to artists and their teams. For example, IGTV wasn't specifically rolled out catered to musicians. It was rolled out for everybody. And everybody can kind of take it and run with it and do what they need to do with it. So it's really cool to see that an artist like John Mayer is providing a platform on something like that, and using his platform and his reachability to connect these new artists with potentially new fans, and these new fans with new artists and music. So I like that. Let's segue into another question, which is, how would somebody go about reaching out to be on a feature like John Mayer's? How can somebody reach out and kind of start that conversation to grow and kind of get into that?
I think it varies, honestly. Like, I'm sure a lot of the features on his IGTV show are coming from artists that he likes or admires, or that he's already friends with or already collaborating with. But I think on a general scale, like, if you hit up John Mayer, he may not get back to you, but there is the next John Mayer in your friend group, potentially, or there's the next Metro Boomin in your friends group. Like, look around you and look within your immediate community of people to collaborate with and to work with, and build with them. And it may take some time. Like, it's not going to happen overnight, but I think aiming only for the biggest features possible isn't the right way to go, especially as a developing artist. Like, there are talented people around you, and you can lean on them to develop your sound and develop your brand and help them develop theirs too, concurrently. So I think it's really just about leaning on your community and building that community up so that if you need a videographer, you have people in your friend group or in your network that you know that you like to work with and collaborate with. Or if you need a producer or a sound engineer or a music director or a set designer or whatever it may be, you're able to tap into your community and work with people who are around your level that you've come up with and that you're able to continue working with and building with over time.
I think that's so important because we all have people and friends that we can kind of immediately reach out to if something goes awry. We can kind of like, oh, I know a guy or I know a gal that can help me with this. So building up that community is super important. And I've done it and have continued to do it. And it's really helped out in a lot of scenarios. So as artists are building their communities and growing their social media presence, how or what are some kind of creative things that you've seen or artists can do that maybe you've done on artists before that they can kind of do on social media to kind of grow their community and kind of strengthen, kind of come closer together? For example, like maybe they play a game every Sunday night on IGTV, or maybe they do giveaways once a month. Or what are some other things that you've seen or have done with artists to kind of grow their communities?
I think that there's a lot. And again, it really just depends on the artist's brand and how they want to connect with their fans. But, I think conceptually from like a content franchise standpoint, there's tons of ideas out there that artists can do, but I really think it's just looking at the features that are available to you on each platform and then trying different things and seeing what works. Like if you're an artist that has a really engaged audience on YouTube, but you notice that videos where you have original music in them are getting significantly more views than videos where you don't have original music, then you should lean into creating that type of content and maybe do more unplugged sets on YouTube or like videos of you performing or showing your writing process and letting fans in that way, because it's easy to tell by the numbers that that's what they're interested in and that's what they want to engage with. So I think it really comes down to just listening to the audience, looking at data, and not letting that own you and own what you create, but just making educated decisions about your business with what you have available to you.
Yeah, it's you gotta kind of take a step back, because artists a lot of times they start running before their feet even hit the ground, and then when they hit the ground, they're literally hitting the ground running. And then they get so far ahead of the competition or so far ahead of themselves even that they forget to take a step back and like look and be like, I don't have anybody to do music videos. I don't have anybody to do this. I don't have anybody to do mixing for my tracks. And I need somebody to do this on this next project. So you kind of have to take a step back and regather yourself and look at the people you've met in your community, to regather and refocus yourself to kind of potentially move into the next quarter or phase of your career and creative future, I guess you could say. How can the listeners keep up with you on social media and follow you?
Yeah, so I'm on every platform, and my username is Shanna X Jade. And you can also follow Dice too. They're at Dice FM on every platform. And really a lot of what I'm working on is like just helping to grow Dice in North America and make that better. So I definitely recommend following them. And we're in New York and Los Angeles now, and we're going to be in Chicago, Miami, Atlanta, Austin, and tons of other North American cities in the next year. So fans are going to be able to go on and discover all the best events in those cities really soon.
Well, that's awesome. So congratulations on that success, and your work inspires me to continue working and keep going in this kind of this relentless industry, I guess you could say, because it is kind of relentless. It's not a very forgiving industry, but you've got to keep your head up and really move forward. So thank you so much, Shanna, for being on the podcast. I really appreciate all the information that you've shared and the tips and tricks. I've learned quite a bit from you. So thanks for taking the time out of your schedule and even jumping on the call early. We jumped on an hour earlier than our scheduled time. So thanks for doing that. I appreciate everything you've done, and thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. I'm so thankful that you tuned in, and I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Miss Shanna Jade. Again, she is the head of music for North America at DICE, which is the ticketing and discovery platform revolutionizing how fans find and attend shows across major cities. And I will put all of her links in the show notes below so you can follow and keep up with her and learn even more. If you have any questions for her, please feel free to shoot them over to her. And I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my mailing list, which will help me notify you when new episodes like this are live, as well as give you some music industry tips and tricks right into your mailbox. There's also a link to my Patreon account, which can help me kind of better the show and work with all of you. There are different tiers where you can work with me. If you have any suggestions there as well, I would love to hear them. But all the money that I make through Patreon will go directly back into the show. I would also encourage you to give me a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, as it greatly helps me grow the show and it be discovered by new listeners. And if you would be ever so kind to leave a little review as well. It doesn't have to be anything too crazy. And lastly, there is a guest request form in the show notes as well. So if you or somebody you know would be a good guest for the show, please fill it out or send it over to them, and I will reach out accordingly to decide whether or not the guest would be good for the show. So thank you for tuning in to the 28th episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. I'm so thankful for all the support that you've done, and I appreciate everything that you've done, and I hope you're enjoying the show. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you next week on When Life Hands You Lemons.